I did 30 years in law enforcement, retired, and coming out of that, I realized, man, we're really missing the mark when it comes to training. We've got training for every aspect of law enforcement, redundant training, right? 13 different ways how to handcuff somebody. Just all this time and energy spent on honing skills that if the core of the individual isn't well, personally, professionally, financially, physically, mentally, if there are deficits there, if they're not thriving, it really doesn't matter what kind of training you give them. The foundation of the individual is cracked. It's broken. And so, we're expecting performance at a certain level when the foundation of the person, we're building this temple on a broken foundation.
Right. Yes. Yeah, man. And it's the same thing. Prosecutors, law enforcement, we work together. It's a lot of the same stuff. You guys are on the front lines and the streets. We're dealing with kind of the vicarious trauma with victims and the stress of having to be perfect and get that win when you got the family. And when I started studying burnout, I noticed things. The same thing with prosecutors, same thing with law enforcement. Little signs and symptoms, like you start to become, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't even know why I'm arresting them. Nothing's going to happen to them.
Yeah. You become indifferent about the whole process. You become
indifferent to it. Yeah. And it's just, you're just so stressed out. And, I can recall times when I was kind of getting bad where it's the same thing. Like, why do we even bother? Why am I going to go to trial on this guy? Even if the judge convicts him, just going to be back out on the streets. I don't even know what the point of this even is. And it's like, that's not me. That wasn't me a few years ago. And I see it in law enforcement too. What can they do? I mean, I have some thoughts on it, but I know you address it head on, especially with law enforcement.
Yeah, man. Listen, universally, right? Universally, I don't care what you're doing. The minute you start caring, and this is going to come out kind of messed up, you can't abandon self-care for the caring of others. You can't put the victim's family and justice for them ahead of your mental health and physical health and well-being. And what ends up happening is that's what we do to a fault. We have our priorities really messed up. We're overly concerned with our performance at work, not realizing that our performance at work demands us to be taking care of ourselves. So we'll pass on that. You won't exercise. You won't eat right. You will obsess about a case for days on end. You won't have a proper sleep cycle. You won't do all these things that we know you need to be doing to maintain your physical and mental health. And we do that thinking that there's going to be no fallout, that's not going to manifest itself at work. And what ends up happening is we find out sometimes too late that not taking care of ourselves in all those crucial areas. This isn't John Kelly's program. I'm not a scientist. This is well-established, truisms that, and we get it confused. And unfortunately, you didn't have to become burnt out. That didn't have to happen. Cops on the job don't have to resort to unhealthy coping mechanisms. They don't have to look at suicide as a solution to a problem because they failed to address the cumulative trauma that's consumed their lives. And so there's so many things that proactively we can get ahead of and do. But we need to, I think, Eric, you and I think we sometimes wait for an environment to be created for us by our leadership, by our bosses, by the state attorney. Right. They're going to recognize that this is what we need, and they're going to pump the brakes, and that doesn't happen, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. When I first started studying burnout, because I just thought I was stressed out. And it wasn't until, like I said, about a year after I left the prosecutor's office, went to another, started doing some civil aspects, started reflecting on it. I found out like burnout's a thing. It's the World Health Organization has classified it. It's an official diagnosis. when I started looking at the signs and symptoms of it, it's like a lot of the stuff that's there. And like you said, when I first started looking at it, I focused on, individual things. What can you do as individually to address burnout? And I think you sort of started a business where you can help officers that are dealing with this, right? Like kind of, because I didn't know about any of this. And had I known about it, I might have done some things differently.
Well, and listen, I know not only do I think you would have, listen, knowledge is power, man. You are a subject matter expert in your field. If somebody wants to bring a case against somebody, they're checking in with you. Well, you're not supposed to know everything about everything. And that's why we have subject matter experts. And I've developed a program that addresses the personal, professional, financial, physical, and mental health of our people. And it takes a whole person approach to getting ahead of it, right? Listen, I like to say that we all experience a slide from time to time. The goal is not to have that slide turn into an avalanche, right? If we're in the middle of an avalanche, we got problems, and they're insurmountable, seemingly. But everybody slides from now and then. So if we can catch you at a slide and bring that awareness. I coach. I do a lot of coaching. I speak at agencies. I speak at conferences. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. And, just after sitting down with somebody that's, reached out, I say, when was the last time you did something for you? And there's silence, brother. Eric, There is silence. I said, no, think back. Like when did you exercise? When did you do anything? When did you read a book? When did you listen to a motivational podcast? When did you go on a vacation with your family? When did you shut your phone off and not look at it?
Yeah.
And it's silence. And we get conditioned, right? We're kind of like mice in that maze, man. We get conditioned to go after, that Pavlov, right? The ringing of the bell, man. And that's the way we are with work. And we get conditioned like Pavlov's dog, that the priority is work, that's everything is consumed around that end goal of being the best, making the most money. And we do all those things at the expense of self-care and taking care of the people that we love. And, so that's what I'm doing, man. I'm bringing awareness to. I have a program. It's called Sometimes Heroes Need Help, and it addresses those areas. And it's just a very proactive. Listen, I'm an alcoholic, addict, adulterer, and that's just the A's, right? I like to joke that we start talking about the B's, C's, and D's, and it gets a little nutty. But I've really come away with some amazing, blessed life lessons over a 30-year career, and people, we can learn from each other. We all don't have to fall in the same hole. I can provide you a roadmap, Eric, where you actually you walk around the hole. You walk around the hole, and if you happen to slip and fall in the hole, I could throw you a ladder. We figured out some ways to get out of it, and it just really revolves around not only self-care, but caring about each other. Listen, I don't know you, brother, but I care about you. I want nothing but the best for you. And if we can just start off a relationship with a complete stranger with the notion that, our political ideologies may be different, and I don't really know what you're about or where you're from, but I want nothing but the best for you. I care for you. I think that's an amazing place to start to try to turn this thing around of ours.
Well, love it. Does mindfulness and meditation play a role? Because when I first started learning about burnout, I said, "What is this nonsense? I'm not going to go sit on a beach and grow my hair out." And when you start to look at it, that's totally not what it is.
No, it's so funny you say that, man. I just downloaded a month and a half ago the Calm app on my phone.
Yeah.
To help me. It's people from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, hearing this conversation, would be scratching their heads. Like, what are these two clowns talking about? Like,
Yeah.
this whole self-awareness and taking care of yourself is a relatively new phenomenon, if you will. I mean, we've seen what happens when you don't. So now there's a big push to educate. So yeah, I meditate every morning, 10 minutes, no crazy poses, no crazy positions. Depending on the temperature and how many bugs are out there in Florida where I'm at, I may sit outside, and I liken it to taking a damp cloth and wiping the chalkboard and cleaning the chalkboard before I start my day. I start my day with a clean slate mentally. It allows me to decompress. And, it's not a perfect art, right? Your mind wanders during meditation, and you come back, and, there's that whole realm of equanimity and all these things that you start learning about. You're like, okay, well, nothing needs to be perfect. I just need to be okay with the way things are, and be good with that in the moment. And yeah, you're 100% on the mark, man. That mindfulness and meditation, it plays a part in preparing you for the day's challenges.
Yes, I love it. It's funny. I'm certainly no expert in mindfulness or meditation, but I recognize it, and I've kind of dabbled into it. I've read John Kabat-Zinn's book, which was awesome. I recommend it to people. And like, especially during COVID, that's when I started doing walking meditation. Didn't even know it was a thing until I read his book. And it was very helpful, because that's when I first sort of started my business. I had all these gigs set up. I was going to go speak, and then it all collapsed. And your mind just doesn't, you're either living in the future all day long about what am I going to do, or you're stuck in the past about am I going to have to go back and do this. I started doing the walking meditation like 10, 15 minutes, every day, every other day. And it helps. It, like you said, it just kind of clears your mind for the day. And it's funny when people tell me, I'm like, hey, you should try it 10, 15 minutes. Just read the book. All kinds of professional athletes do this. Give it a shot. And what's the response? I don't have time for that. If you don't have time for 10 to 15 minutes of meditation,
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
right.
It means you probably need an hour.
Right. That's hysterical. Yeah. Eric, what you hit on there was, that's a decision that you make. You make the decision to allot 10, 15, 20, whatever it is for you. And regardless of what's going on, if and you can appreciate now the value of you making time throughout the day for you, not selfish, it's mandatory, right? It's mandatory. Right. And you don't do that at the expense of your family. No, there's plenty of time. If we make it a priority, there's plenty of time to do all the things that we need to do for our family without disregarding the importance of self-care. I have a thing I talk about when I wrote in the book, 99.9% of the problems that I encountered in life, Eric, were of my own making. I've seen and been a part of some horrific things, and that's fine, but it's still of my making how I decide to deal with that.
Right.
And so there isn't much you can skate on. There isn't much if you adopt that philosophy of, listen, I have control over this. This is, if it's of my making, if I contributed to it, then I can undo it. I can address it. I have control over my life. Every moment, every waking moment of it. And I think we've adopted, unfortunately, in society, this victim mindset where we're powerless. It's your fault, Eric, and it's his fault. And then the minute we start pointing fingers, we lose the control and the ability to solve our own problems. And then we're at the mercy of the universe that, quite frankly, isn't stopping, isn't pulling over to solve our problems for us. So I think so much of not only preventing burnout, but recognizing it is ownership, is taking inventory. And, we don't have to be perfect. God knows, man. God knows I've fallen and failed more times than I care to remember. But once we identify that, there's something really cool that happens, man, with that power that you decide rests with you to solve the problem. And that's an exciting place to be in.
Right on. That is awesome. That's good stuff, man. John, what advice would you give to some younger officers that, and I'll give you an example. I work with a police department here as an advisor, and, we're about a medium-sized department, high crime, and high turnover. So you get a lot of younger guys that get thrown into detective roles and, supervisory roles, and it's a lot. It happens quick, and they everyone wants to do the right thing, and they're working a ton of hours. What advice would you give to one of these younger officers as they, find themselves in that role where they have so much expectations and so little resources?
And listen, it's going to be real easy because I've been there. Like I know what you're talking about. The first thing with anything is know that you don't know. That's the first obstacle facing young supervisors, and that they're afraid to admit that they don't know, that they don't have the answer. So instead of, having some humility and understanding that humility, vulnerability are all things that draw people to you, right? And admit, I don't know. I don't know is huge. Okay, I don't know doesn't leave anybody in the lurch. I don't know means I don't know, and I'm going to find out. And that way there, I think there's a connection that gets drawn. I think too many times people pretend to know the answer, and people like yourself and me that have been in the business for a little bit can smell that bullshit a mile away.
Right.
So, and so you lose credibility. You lose leadership credibility when you aren't honest with your folks. And so I would say, know that you don't know. Don't be afraid to show a vulnerable side of you to your people that you're human. And don't lose your identity. Be true to who you are. This is as much as I loved law, I had to have loved it if I was in it for 30 years. As much as I loved it, man, when you start becoming the title, I'm John, man. When you start introducing yourself as Sergeant Kelly, you got a problem. You got a problem. You've lost your way. And I think with young people, getting promoted, maybe not having a lot of time in rank and having a lot of years. I was 12 years on before I got promoted to a sergeant position, and I worked a real busy area. So I had those life experiences and the time in grade to help make good decisions. Nothing teaches you like experience. And so when you have people in leadership positions that don't have the experience and they're trying to wing it, that's never a good recipe for success. So
Right.
I would say, don't lose your identity. You can be awesome at the job as long as you stay grounded, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a wealth of knowledge all around you if you just ask.
You're right. Know that you don't know. I love it. That's
right.
You're right. I mean, they say fake it till you make it, but like you said, people can smell the bullshit a mile away. And a lot of times just being authentic and there's, going to the resources to get the help, and rather than just stressing yourself out, trying to figure it out yourself. I love it. Speaking of management, I know we spent a lot of time on this topic, but I kind of want to get your take on this. As I really dove deep into the whole kind of burnout thing, what I realized is there is only, so much that the individual can do. I realized that our organizations, our agencies across the board, not just in law enforcement or with district attorneys' offices, that supervisors in the management style of an agency can play a huge role in burnout. And I don't know. I mean, what's your take on that? what do you think about that? Because I've seen
Man,
it to be absolutely true.
You're throwing me some softballs here, bro, because I love it. Listen, so I've got this thing, Eric, that I always refer back to. I got a superpower and I've got a prayer. The prayer is the serenity prayer, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? That's the binding part of that. And then couple that with my superpower, which is my ability to dismiss people's nonsense.
Love it.
It took me a while to develop that. I remember screaming, Eric, at the top of my lungs on the phone outside, wearing my shoes down on the sidewalk like a caged animal, screaming about a man I did not respect who had absolutely no standing in my life. But I was allowing him to keep me from my family that was enjoying dinner inside. And God knows what kind of health damage I was doing to myself, with the blood pressure and it. And so, again, knowing that you don't listen, you're going to have some good bosses, and you're going to have some bosses that are horrible. And I tell this to people: if you got a horrible boss, there's something to be learned from that boss. I had an alcoholic dad. I loved him dearly, but he also showed me some really huge life lessons on how I never wanted to be. All right. Mm-hmm. A bad boss can do the same for you, and say, you know what? I am not going to use that style of management. I'm not going to interact with my people that way. And then really, when you get down to it, the only people in your life that have standing are direct family, right? And your kid, direct family. Everybody else, honestly, Eric, if they don't have standing, but we give them standing. We give them a place in our life that they hold over us. And so I get people to kind of reframe that relationship, especially on an unhealthy one. And it takes some doing because, again, we are programmed to care more about our performance at work than our performance at home. And so that's where that disconnect comes. And I'm not saying, don't be an excellent employee, don't meet your deadlines, don't be a superstar. But your real value and how you're measured comes from the people who have standing in your life, your kids, your spouse, not the knucklehead supervisor who is screaming about something that makes no sense that you're allowing to get a rise out of you. You know? Did I answer that good enough?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And some of the prosecutors that watch the podcast should listen to that too. Don't let the opposing counsel who always drives you nuts kind of ruin your weekend. I've been there myself. You'll learn from those lessons. You're right.
Absolutely.
That's huge. John, you know what they tell me? I try to watch YouTube videos on how to do a channel and stuff, and they say after 30 minutes, people just stop paying attention.
We're right there, brother.
We're right there. And you've given us a ton of value. This has been a lot of fun. You have so much experience, and it was no nonsense. I believe you said it best. Like, we don't want to talk. This is the no bullshit talk on this episode right here. What a lot of the topics you talked about and you covered, you mentioned that you do coaching, you speak at conferences. If someone's watching or listening, they want to know more about what you do or how to contact you, where can they go to find that info?
Thank you, Eric. lawenforcementlifecoach.com. All one word, lawenforcementlifecoach.com. It's a website there. It's got all the links for scheduling and all the information that one could need. They want to find out a little bit more about John Kelly.
Yeah. Awesome. And I'm going to have a link in the description. If you're listening to the podcast, as you know, it'll be in there. If you're watching this, it's down in the description. And I think, don't you have a podcast also, John?
Sure. I got a podcast. I just authored a book not too long ago. The podcast is the Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. And it deals a lot with wellness and supporting each other in the community. And the book I just authored is Surviving Self-Inflicted Wounds, A Deputy's Life of Redemption. And that's actually available on Amazon. I appreciate you helping me out with that.
Yeah, you bet. And I think we've been talking. I'm going to try to come on your podcast next.
That would be awesome. I can tell you that. I can tell you that your perspective on things it would be greatly beneficial to my listeners.
I'd love to do it. So there you have it, folks. If make sure you sign up for John's podcast because you get to see the attorney getting grilled by the officer for lunch. It's going to be fun.
It's about time.
That's right.
Man.
Well, John, I can't thank you enough. I know that a lot of the people who watch the old podcast here are going to take a lot of value from it. So there you have it, folks. Check out John's stuff, lawenforcementlifecoach.com. He's got his book and his podcast. That's pretty much all we got for you today. May have to have you on here again sometime, again, John, because there's a lot of topics. I got a bunch of notes here I didn't even get to, so you have to tune in for the next episode. Thanks
Looking
again, John.
forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks again, John. Everybody out there, take care. Remember, every battle's won before it's fought. You guys all stay safe. We'll see you on the next episode.